The Carpenter's Gift. In the ancient town of Capernaum, nestled beside the shimmering waters of the Sea of Galilee, there lived a young fisherman named Tobias. He was known throughout the village for two things: his remarkable skill at catching fish and his deep, unrelenting bitterness toward life itself. Tobias had not always been this way. 5 years earlier, he had been a different man entirely, full of laughter, hope, and dreams for the future. He had been engaged to a beautiful woman named Miriam, whose smile could light up the darkest room and whose kindness touched everyone she met. They were to be married in the spring, when the wildflowers bloomed along the hillsides and the air was sweet with promise. But tragedy struck without warning. Miriam fell ill with a terrible fever that came upon her suddenly like a storm in the night. Despite the prayers of her family, the desperate pleas of Tobias, and the efforts of every physician in the region, the fever would not break. Within 2 weeks, she was gone, taken from this world just 3 weeks before their wedding day. From that moment, something inside Tobias died as well. He stopped attending the synagogue, stopped speaking to his neighbors except when absolutely necessary, and spent his days alone on his fishing boat, speaking to no one but the wind and the waves. The other fishermen whispered about him in the marketplace, saying he had become as cold and hard as the stones beneath the water, that his heart had turned to ice. His mother begged him to return to the life he once knew. His father pleaded with him to open his heart again, but Tobias could not or would not let go of his pain. It had become his constant companion, his identity, the lens through which he viewed the entire world. One morning, as the sun began its slow climb over the eastern hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Tobias was preparing his boat for another lonely day of fishing. The marketplace was just beginning to stir with activity. Merchants setting up their stalls, women gathering water from the well, children running through the narrow streets with the boundless energy of youth. That's when he heard it, a commotion near the town square, the sound of many voices rising together in excitement. Tobias tried to ignore it, focusing on his nets and his work, but the sound grew louder. A crowd was gathering around someone who was teaching, and the teacher's voice carried across the morning air with unusual clarity and warmth, like honey poured over warm bread. Despite himself, despite his determination to remain isolated from the world, Tobias found his feet moving toward the crowd. He told himself he was merely curious, that he would listen for just a moment before returning to his boat, but something in that voice called to him in a way he couldn't explain. The teacher was a man named Jesus, a carpenter from the small town of Nazareth who had been traveling throughout Galilee. He sat on a low stone wall in the center of the square, surrounded by people of all kinds: wealthy merchants in fine robes, poor beggars in tattered clothing, Roman soldiers standing at attention, tax collectors whom most Jews despised, and simple fishermen still smelling of the sea. Jesus was teaching them about the kingdom of God, speaking in parables, simple stories that somehow made even the most complex spiritual truths feel accessible and beautiful. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus was saying, his eyes bright with passion, is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. He travels far and wide, examining thousands of pearls, seeking the one that is truly perfect. And when he finally finds one pearl of great value, one pearl that surpasses all others, what does he do? He goes and sells everything he has, his house, his possessions, everything, and he buys that pearl, because he knows that this one pearl is worth more than all his worldly wealth combined. Tobias stood at the back of the crowd, arms crossed defensively over his chest, determined not to be moved by pretty words and spiritual platitudes. He had heard enough sermons in his life. The rabbis and scribes had offered him no comfort when Miriam died, only empty phrases about God's will and the importance of faith. But there was something different about this teacher. Jesus didn't speak with the condescension or superiority that Tobias had come to expect from religious leaders.
He didn't quote endless laws and regulations or condemn those who failed to meet impossible standards. Instead, he spoke as though he genuinely loved every single person listening to him, as though each one of them was that pearl of great value he had described. When Jesus finished teaching, people began to press forward, approaching him with their problems and questions. Some asked about the law of Moses, others wanted to know about salvation and eternal life. Still others simply wanted to be near him, to feel the peace and warmth that seemed to radiate from his presence. Tobias turned to leave, to return to the safety of his boat and his solitude, but then he heard a familiar voice crying out in desperation. "Master, please, my son is very ill. He's dying." Tobias turned back. It was David, one of his fellow fishermen, a good man with a kind heart. David's young son, Samuel, had been sick for several days with a high fever. Tobias had heard the other fishermen talking about it with great concern, had seen the worry etched deep into David's face.
Jesus looked at David with eyes full of compassion, eyes that seemed to see not just the surface of things, but down into the very depths of a person's soul. "Take me to him," he said simply, standing up from the wall. The crowd followed as Jesus walked with David through the narrow streets to his modest home near the edge of town. Tobias found himself following too, though he couldn't have said exactly why. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was something deeper, something he didn't want to acknowledge. Inside the small, dim house, young Samuel lay on a mat in the corner, his small body still as death. His face was pale and covered with sweat, his breathing shallow and labored. His mother knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face, her lips moving in silent prayer. The room smelled of sickness and fear and desperate hope. Jesus knelt beside the boy and placed his hand gently on Samuel's burning forehead. He closed his eyes and prayed quietly, words that Tobias couldn't quite hear from where he stood in the doorway. The room fell silent. Even the crowd outside seemed to hold its collective breath. Then Jesus smiled, a smile of such pure joy and certainty that it seemed to light up the entire room. "Samuel," he said softly, "stand up." The boy's eyes opened, suddenly clear and bright. Color returned to his cheeks like water flowing back into a dried riverbed. He sat up, looking confused, but completely healthy, as though the fever had never touched him at all. His mother gasped and immediately embraced him, tears of joy now streaming down her face instead of tears of despair. David fell to his knees before Jesus, thanking him over and over, his voice thick with emotion and gratitude. The crowd erupted in amazement, people crying out in wonder and praising God. But Tobias felt something dark and terrible twist in his chest, a pain so sharp it nearly took his breath away. Where was this miracle worker 5 years ago? Where was Jesus when Miriam was dying? Where was God when Tobias had prayed day and night for healing that never came? He turned and pushed his way through the crowd, his jaw clenched tight, his vision blurred with angry tears. He didn't stop until he reached his boat, where he shoved off from shore with violent, forceful movements, nearly tearing his sail in his haste to escape. But even out on the water, miles from shore, Tobias couldn't escape his thoughts. He tried to focus on his nets, on the familiar rhythm of his work, on the sound of the waves against the hull of his boat. But his mind kept returning to the scene he had witnessed. The joy on David's face, the peace in Jesus' eyes, the impossible miracle of a dying boy suddenly whole and healthy. It wasn't fair. Nothing about any of this was fair. Days passed. Tobias tried to return to his routine, to his comfortable isolation, but the town was buzzing with stories about Jesus. The teacher was staying in Capernaum, and every day brought new miracles. A paralyzed man had stood up and walked, carrying his own mat through the streets. A woman who had suffered from a bleeding disorder for 12 years had been healed simply by touching the hem of Jesus' garment. A Roman centurion's beloved servant had been healed from a distance without Jesus even entering the man's home. Each story made Tobias's heart harder, the bitterness deeper. Why these people? Why not Miriam? What made them more deserving of God's mercy? Then, one evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Tobias returned from a day of fishing to find Jesus sitting on the shore, waiting for him, alone, just sitting there on a large rock, as though he had all the time in the world, as though he had been waiting specifically for Tobias. "Tobias," Jesus said quietly, as though they were old friends who had known each other for years. "I've been hoping to speak with you." Tobias's heart pounded in his chest. "I don't want to talk," he said gruffly, hauling his nets from the boat with more force than necessary. "I know about Miriam," Jesus said gently. Tobias froze. His hands gripped the nets so tightly his knuckles turned white. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Don't," he said, his voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. "Don't you dare speak her name." "You're angry with God," Jesus said. It wasn't a question, just a simple statement of fact. Tobias spun around, his face contorted with pain and rage that had been building for 5 long years. "Angry?" he shouted, his voice echoing across the water. "I'm beyond angry. I prayed every single day for her to be healed, every morning, every night, until my knees were bruised and my voice was hoarse. My family prayed, her family prayed, the entire village prayed, and she died anyway. She was good and kind and pure. She never hurt anyone in her entire life. She only wanted to help people, to teach children, to make the world a little better. And she suffered, and God did nothing." He was shouting now, years of suppressed pain and fury pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't care. "And now you come here, healing strangers, performing miracles for people you've never met. You healed that boy, Samuel, in an instant. You healed a Roman servant. You healed people who probably don't even believe in God. Where were you when I needed you? Where was God when Miriam needed him? Why them and not her? Answer me that."
Jesus let Tobias's words hang in the air between them, carried away by the evening breeze. He didn't look shocked or offended by the outburst. He didn't recite scripture or offer platitudes about God's mysterious ways. He simply looked at Tobias with eyes full of profound sadness and infinite love, as though he could feel every ounce of Tobias's pain as his own. "Tobias," Jesus said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "do you think I don't understand your pain?" "How could you possibly understand?" Tobias shot back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "You perform miracles. You heal the sick. You're God's chosen one, or so everyone says. What do you know about losing someone you love? What do you know about unanswered prayers?" Jesus stood and walked closer until he was just a few feet away from Tobias. "I understand loss," he said quietly. "I understand suffering more than you know, and I tell you truly, there is coming a day when I myself will experience suffering beyond anything you can imagine. I will be betrayed by one I love. I will be abandoned by my closest friends. I will suffer and die in agony. But through that suffering, through that death, death itself will be defeated forever. Miriam's death is not the end of her story, Tobias. It's not the end." Tobias shook his head, confused and frustrated. "What are you talking about? She's gone. Her body is in a tomb. That's the end. That's the only end there is." "Is it?" Jesus asked, his voice gentle but insistent. "Tell me something, Tobias. When you close your eyes at night, is she truly gone? Or do you still see her face? Do you still hear her laughter? Does her love still live in your heart? Does her kindness still influence who you are, even now?" Tobias was silent, his throat tight. "Her body may be in a tomb," Jesus continued, "but love, true love, cannot be buried. It cannot be killed. And I have come to tell you that death itself is not the final word, that there is life beyond this life, that everyone who believes will one day be reunited with those they love, in a place where there is no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain. The old order of things will pass away, and all things will be made new. That's impossible, Tobias whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Jesus smiled softly. Is it more impossible than healing a boy on the edge of death? More impossible than making a paralyzed man walk? More impossible than creating this entire world with a word?
Tobias wanted to argue, wanted to hold on to his anger and his pain, because they were familiar, because they were all he had left. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he sank down onto the sand, utterly exhausted by the weight of 5 years of grief and bitterness. Jesus sat down beside him, and they watched the sun complete its descent below the horizon together, the sky slowly darkening from orange to purple to deep blue. "Your pain is real, Tobias," Jesus said after a long silence. "I'm not asking you to pretend it isn't. I'm not asking you to forget Miriam or to stop missing her. But I am asking you not to let your pain consume you. Don't let bitterness steal the rest of your life. Don't let grief become your identity." "I don't know how to let go," Tobias admitted, his voice breaking. "I've held on to this pain for so long. I don't know who I am without it." "You don't have to let go all at once," Jesus said gently, "and you don't have to do it alone. Let me help you carry it. Let me help you find your way back to life." They sat together in silence as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, tiny points of light pushing back against the darkness. Tobias felt something shifting inside him, like ice beginning to thaw after a long, hard winter. It was painful, this thawing, but it also felt like the first breath after being underwater for too long. "Miriam loved children," Tobias said suddenly, surprised by his own words. "She wanted to be a teacher. She would gather the neighborhood children under the olive trees and tell them stories. Stories from the scriptures, stories she made up herself. They adored her." Jesus smiled warmly. "Tell me more about her." And so Tobias did. For the first time in 5 years, he talked about Miriam. Not about her death, not about her illness, but about her life. He talked about her infectious laugh that would echo through the marketplace. He talked about her terrible cooking. She could burn water, he said with the ghost of a smile, and the way she would scrunch up her nose when she was thinking hard about something. He talked about how she would dance when she thought no one was watching. He talked about the future they had planned together, the children they had hoped to have, the home they had dreamed of building. Jesus listened to every word, never interrupting, never judging, simply present and attentive. And with each memory Tobias shared, he felt the weight he had been carrying grow a little lighter, the grip of bitterness loosen just a bit. When the stars had fully emerged and the fishing boats in the harbor were mere shadows on the dark water, Jesus stood. "Will you do something for me, Tobias?"
"What?" Tobias asked, standing as well. "Tomorrow, there's a widow in town named Rachel. Her husband died last year, leaving her alone with 3 young children. She's struggling to provide for them, struggling to keep hope alive. Will you visit her? Will you take her oldest son fishing and teach him how to mend nets? He needs a man in his life, someone to guide him." Tobias hesitated, fear rising in his chest. "Why me? I'm broken. I have nothing to offer anyone." "You have more to offer than you know," Jesus said, his hand on Tobias's shoulder. "You understand loss. You understand pain. And Miriam's love doesn't have to die with her. You can keep it alive by loving others in her memory. You can honor her by being the kind, generous person she would have wanted you to be. That night, Tobias barely slept. He tossed and turned, wrestling with Jesus' words, with the possibility of opening his heart again, of risking more pain. But when morning came, he found himself standing outside Rachel's small house, his heart pounding, feeling more nervous than he had in years. When Rachel answered the door, Tobias could see the exhaustion etched deep into her face, the worry that seemed to weigh down her shoulders. Her 3 children peered out from behind her skirts, 2 girls and a boy, all thin and wearing clothes that had been mended many times. "Yes?" Rachel asked cautiously. "I'm Tobias," he said awkwardly. Jesus of Nazareth sent me. I thought I might take your son fishing, if that's all right, to teach him." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Oh," she said, her voice trembling. "Oh, thank you so much. Eli has been so lost since his father died. He needs someone to talk to, someone to show him the way." The boy's name was Eli, and he was 11 years old, small for his age and far too serious. As they walked to the shore together, Eli was quiet and withdrawn, his eyes downcast. Tobias recognized the look in those eyes immediately. It was the same look he had seen in his own reflection for 5 long years, the look of someone carrying a weight too heavy for their shoulders. Out on the boat, Tobias began to teach Eli how to cast the net properly, how to read the water for signs of fish, how to mend tears in the netting. At first, they worked in silence, only the sound of water and wind and the occasional cry of a seabird. Then, carefully, choosing his words with great care, Tobias began to tell Eli about Miriam.
"I lost someone I loved very much," Tobias said, not looking at the boy, but out at the horizon. "Her name was Miriam, and we were going to be married. When she died, I thought I would never feel happy again. I thought the pain would kill me. I was angry at everyone and everything, angry at God, angry at the world, angry at myself." Eli looked up at him, his young face serious and attentive. "My mother cries at night," he said quietly. "She thinks I don't hear her, but I do. I hear her crying and praying, asking God why he took my father." "Grief is like that," Tobias said, feeling his throat tightened with emotion. "It comes in waves, like the sea. Sometimes you think you're doing fine, that you're finally moving forward, and then suddenly it crashes over you again, and you can barely breathe. But I'm learning something important, Eli. I'm learning that the pain means the love was real, and that love doesn't have to end just because the person is gone." "How can love continue if they're not here?" Eli asked, his voice small and confused. Tobias pulled in the net, which was full of fish, silver bodies flashing in the sunlight. "We can keep loving them by loving others," he said. "We can honor their memory by being kind, by helping people who need help, by choosing hope instead of bitterness. Your father would want you to take care of your mother and sisters. My Miriam would want me to help people like your family. That's how love continues." Over the following weeks and months, Tobias began to change in ways he never thought possible. He started spending time regularly with Rachel's family, teaching Eli not just about fishing, but about being a man of integrity and kindness. He helped Rachel repair the roof of her house when the winter rains came. He shared his catch with other families in the village who were struggling. He began talking to his fellow fishermen again, really talking, not just exchanging curt greetings. He returned to the synagogue, though he still struggled with his faith, still had questions and doubts. But the all-consuming bitterness that had defined him for so long was slowly being replaced by something else, something that felt like purpose, like meaning, like the first green shoots of hope pushing through hard ground. Jesus continued teaching in Capernaum and the surrounding regions for many weeks. Tobias didn't follow him everywhere, didn't become one of the close disciples, but he often joined the crowds to listen when Jesus taught in the town.
Each teaching seemed to speak directly to his heart, showing him new ways to live with love and forgiveness and grace. One day, Jesus taught about building your house on rock rather than sand, about the importance of not just hearing his words, but putting them into practice. Another day, he talked about loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you, about being merciful just as God is merciful. He spoke of forgiveness that knows no limits, of faith
that can move mountains, of the incredible, unending love that God has for every single person, no matter their mistakes or failings. Tobias began to share these teachings with Eli during their fishing trips, and he watched the boy slowly emerge from his own grief, saw hope and joy beginning to return to his eyes. And in helping Eli heal, in watching the transformation, Tobias found his own healing accelerating in ways he never expected. 6 months passed in this way. Then, one morning, Tobias and Eli were out on the boat, practicing knots, when they heard shouting from the shore. Jesus was walking along the beach with several of his disciples, calling out to fishermen who were washing their nets. "Come, follow me," Jesus called to Simon and Andrew, 2 brothers Tobias knew well, good men and skilled fishermen. "Come, and I will make you fishers of men." To Tobias's complete amazement, Simon and Andrew immediately left their nets right there on the beach and followed Jesus. Then Jesus called to James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were mending nets with their father. And they too left everything, their nets, their boat, their father, their entire livelihood, and followed Jesus without hesitation. Tobias watched them go, feeling a strange mix of emotions swirling in his chest. Part of him longed to follow too, to leave everything behind and walk with this remarkable teacher who had changed his life so profoundly. But he looked down at Eli, who was watching him with wide, worried eyes. "Are you going to go with them?" Eli asked, his voice small and afraid. Tobias thought about it carefully. He thought about Rachel and her children, about the other families in Capernaum he had begun helping, about the life he was slowly, painfully rebuilding from the ashes of his grief. He thought about what Jesus had told him that evening on the beach, that Miriam's love could continue through him. "No," he said finally, placing his hand on Eli's shoulder. Jesus called those men to follow him on the road, to travel throughout the land spreading his teachings. But I think he's called me to follow him here in Capernaum, to love and serve the people in my own town, to be the kind of person Miriam would be proud of, to help people like you and your family. Eli smiled with such obvious relief that Tobias felt his decision confirmed in his heart. That evening, Tobias saw Jesus one more time before the teacher and his growing group of disciples left for other villages. They met on the same stretch of beach where they had first really talked, where Tobias had poured out his anger and pain. "You're not coming with us?" Jesus asked, though his tone and the gentle smile on his face suggested he already knew the answer and approved of it. "I think my path is here," Tobias said. "You helped me see that Miriam's death wasn't meaningless, that it doesn't have to be just a tragedy. You showed me that her love can continue through me, that I can honor her memory by helping others. There are people here who need that help, widows like Rachel, children like Eli who have lost their fathers. I want to be there for them. I think that's what I'm meant to do." Jesus put his hand on Tobias's shoulder, and Tobias felt warmth and peace flow through him. "You've learned the greatest lesson of all, my friend," Jesus said. "The kingdom of God isn't just found in miracles and great works and crowds of thousands. It's found in quiet acts of love, in daily kindness, in choosing to serve others even when your own heart is breaking. It's found in men like you, who take broken boys fishing and teach them how to hope again." "I still miss her," Tobias admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I always will." "Of course you will," Jesus said gently, his eyes full of understanding. "And that's okay. Love doesn't end with death, Tobias, but neither does life. You've chosen to keep living, truly living, and that honors both Miriam's memory and the life that God has given you. That's all any of us can do. Choose life, choose love, choose hope, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Jesus and his disciples left Capernaum the next day, walking south toward Jerusalem, followed by crowds of people who wanted to hear him teach. But his impact on the town remained, rippling outward like stones thrown into still water. Tobias became known throughout Capernaum not as the bitter, lonely fisherman who had closed his heart to the world, but as a man of compassion and generosity, someone who helped widows and orphans, who taught young boys how to fish and how to be men of integrity. He eventually helped organize a group of fishermen who donated part of their catch every week to feed those in need in the village. He never forgot Jesus' teachings. When he faced difficulties, he would remember the parables about building on rock, about persistent faith, about loving even those who hurt you. When he was tempted to fall back into bitterness, he would remember that evening on the beach, the way Jesus had listened to his pain without judgment, the promise that death was not the final word. Years later, terrible news reached Capernaum. Jesus had been arrested in Jerusalem, tried on false charges, and executed by the Romans, crucified on a cross like a common criminal. Tobias wept bitter tears when he heard. He wept for the man who had saved his life without performing a single miracle on him, who had shown him that
Healing could come through love and purpose, and choosing life even in the face of death. But then, just days later, impossible news began to spread. Jesus had risen from the dead. He had appeared to his disciples, to hundreds of people. Death had been defeated, just as he had promised that evening on the beach. The tomb was empty. Jesus was alive. When Tobias heard this news, he fell to his knees and wept again, but this time with joy and wonder and a hope so profound it felt like his chest might burst. Everything Jesus had told him was true. Death was not the end. Love was stronger than death. Miriam's story wasn't over. His story wasn't over. Nothing was over because Jesus had defeated death itself. On quiet mornings after that, when Tobias was out on his boat watching the sun rise over the Sea of Galilee, painting the water in shades of gold and pink, he would think about Miriam. But the memories no longer brought only pain. Now they brought gratitude for the time they had together, hope for the reunion Jesus had promised, and motivation to live each day with love and purpose and joy. Eli grew into a fine young man, strong and kind and good. He became a fisherman himself, working alongside Tobias for many years. When Eli's wedding day came, he asked Tobias to stand with him as a father would, to give him away to his bride. Tobias agreed, his heart full. As he watched Eli exchange vows with his bride, promising to love her in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, until death parted them, Tobias felt Miriam's presence as clearly as if she were standing right beside him. He could almost hear her whisper, "I'm proud of you. You chose love. You chose life. You honored our love by loving others." "Thank you," Tobias whispered back. Whether to Miriam or to Jesus or to God himself, he wasn't entirely sure. Perhaps it didn't matter. Perhaps they were all connected. The love of a woman who had died too young, the carpenter's son who had conquered death itself, the God who had created love in the first place. The gratitude was real, the love was real, the healing was real, the hope was real. Years later, when Tobias was an old man with silver in his hair and countless wrinkles earned from a lifetime of smiling and laughing and living fully, he would tell his story to anyone who would listen. He would tell them about Miriam, about his years of bitterness, about the day a carpenter from Nazareth sat beside him on a beach and helped him understand that love was stronger than death, that grief could be transformed into purpose, that broken hearts could be made whole again. And he would end his story the same way every time. Jesus didn't bring Miriam back to me in this life, but he gave me something even more precious. He brought me back to life. He taught me that the greatest miracle isn't always the most dramatic one. Sometimes the greatest miracle is the slow, painful, beautiful process of learning to hope again, to love again, to choose life again. The carpenter's son from Nazareth had given Tobias the greatest gift. Not the miracle he had demanded, but the miracle he truly needed. Not the resurrection of Miriam, but the resurrection of Tobias himself. Resurrection from bitterness to love, from death to life, from despair to hope. And on that wedding day, watching love triumph over loss once again, watching Eli begin his own journey of love with the same hope and joy that Tobias had once known with Miriam, Tobias finally understood with perfect clarity that this was always the greater miracle. This was always what Jesus had come to do, not just to heal bodies, but to heal hearts. Not just to raise the dead, but to bring the living back to life. Not just to defeat death at the end of time, but to defeat it every single day, in every single heart that chose love over bitterness, hope over despair, life over death. And in that moment, surrounded by celebration and joy, Tobias felt more alive than he had in years, more whole, more grateful, more loved. The carpenter's gift had been received. The broken heart had been healed, and love, true, eternal, unstoppable love, had won. The end.